Good afternoon. I'm President Rich Atwater, and welcome to our teleconferencing Wing Central meeting, and thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I wanted to provide an overview of the public comment process. If you wish to provide live public comment, please submit your request through the link to the online request form noted on our agenda packet on the front page of the agenda. Please make sure to submit that form by 2:15. We are also accepting written comments, and all written comments should be emailed to Ms. Claudia Rodriguez before the conclusion of the meeting. They will be included in the record of this meeting. And so with that, I'll ask Claudia if you would like to call the roll of the board.
Gladly. Good afternoon, everybody. Director Atwater.
Present.
Director Millibar.
Here.
Director Estremera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Here.
Director Martin.
Present.
Director Chang.
Here.
Excellent. And alternate director Flamereau.
Here.
Excellent. And just for the record, Director Anabdawi is not going to be present today, and alternate director Flamereau will be participating on his behalf.
Excellent. We'll move on. Item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. If you please place your hand over your heart and follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United States of America,
and to which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we'll move on to going to approval of the minutes of March 9th.
Public comment first, Rich.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, I skipped over the public comment. I'll ask Claudia, do we have anybody on the request to make comments at this point in time?
President Atwater, at this time, we have not received any public comment request. Just as a reminder to the public, our cutoff is 2:15, and we do have the URL for the public comment request form on the agenda and on the website.
Thank you. So we can move on to approval of the minutes of March 9th, which was the special board meeting, and then the second meeting minutes of our regular scheduled board meeting.
Move we approve.
We have a second.
Martin, second.
Great. I'll ask Claudia to call the roll.
Lee, President Atwater,
Aye.
Director Millibar,
Aye.
Director Stamera,
Aye.
Director Palmer,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
Director Chang,
Yes.
alternate director Flamereau.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion passes.
Great.
Now, Rich, just a quick question. Was that just for March 9th or was that for both?
I assumed it was for both, but I know when you made the motion, it might have been unclear. Do you want to, is there any
Okay, then
ambiguity?
let's move for approval of March 18th, regular board meeting.
Okay.
Yes, I move.
Who was the second?
Martin, I second.
Great. All right, Claudia, please call the roll on that.
Gladly. President Atwater,
Yes.
Director Millibar,
Aye.
Director Stamera,
Aye.
Director Palmer,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
Director Chang,
Yes.
and alternate director Flamereau.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion passes.
Great. Agenda item 6, consent calendar. We do not have any items on that. So we can move on to agenda item 7, and that's the discussion items. And 7A is the introduction by Graham.
Okay, well, excellent. Thank you, Claudia. First, I'd just like to say I'm very excited, very happy to be here, and happy to provide this introduction. So Claudia, would you go to the next slide, please? So first, I'll just start with a bit of my background. I've got a bachelor's and master's in hydrogeology, both from Clemson University. Got 20 years of industry experience, the last 16 with the local office of GEI Consultants, specializing in evaluation, design, and construction of water supply infrastructure and flood risk reduction infrastructure, primarily in Northern California. I'm a professional geologist and California certified engineering geologist and hydrogeologist. I've led projects ranging from feasibility studies through design and construction. But while I do have a lot of technical experience working with and leading multidisciplinary teams, I also have experience with governance and management, including managing GEI's local engineering division, and which at this point is about 30 staff, and then also serving on GEI's corporate board of directors for the past several years. Beginning in February 2019, I was dedicated full-time to the Delta Conveyance project, beginning first as the levee and forebay lead as part of the engineering design management team, but then also transitioning to a deputy role for Phil Ryan, engineering design manager. As part of both of those roles, I've led several program-wide studies and evaluations, and was also a regular attendee and presenter stakeholder engagement committee meetings. Next slide, please. So my key executive director responsibilities as we continue through the planning phase will be to lead the DCA team. And so that includes the key contracts, Jacobs with the engineering design management contract, and Parsons with program management contract. Communicate with the DCA board members and coordinate the board meetings, such as today. Preparing annual budgets for the DCA, which is the subject of at least one of the items on today's agenda, is to review the draft annual budget for the next fiscal year. Manage the execution of our task orders and ensure that we're being entirely responsive to DWR's work requests as we continue to work through the environmental document with DWR. Continue to lead DCA's external communications and engagements. I'll note the DCA board's been very specific in wanting to ensure the relationship with the community continues to be transparent and consistent. Based on what I've seen and experienced on the program, if built, the project design and construction logistics are certainly better today because of the community input we've received, and as a direct result of collaboration with the communities throughout the Delta and our determination to support Delta's place. I'm committed to maintaining that standard. So I'll add on top of all that, like many of us, we're wearing multiple hats for the next couple of years. And so I will also continue to be a functional part of the engineering team, continuing to serve as in some instances a deputy to Phil, but also the lead for forebay and levee related studies, as well as many of the other program-wide studies. Next slide, please. So my vision for the key focus areas of the
Did it freeze
DCA.
up?
What's that, Director Palmer?
Oh, I was wondering if you had frozen up. Okay. Maybe it's my internet connection.
Oh, okay. Is it freezing up for anybody else? President Atwater, is it okay?
I know, it looks fine.
Okay. All right, great. So my vision, the key focus areas for the DCA will be to operate in a collaborative manner that brings multiple voices and perspectives. I think we can all agree this is fundamental to the success of the project. Continue to communicate the work we're doing in a transparent way and make very good use of constructive feedback. Ensure that we're delivering top quality work consistent with a world-class project and organization. Continue to be creative and innovative in our thinking about solutions and opportunities. And while collaboration and communication is part of community engagement, I wanted to call out community on this slide to ensure that we're all clear about this agency's commitment to developing a project that reflects community input. So that's what I prepared for my introduction. So the next slide, Claudia, is just a question slide. Appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and vision here, and welcome any questions at this point.
Yes, and Claudia, just on all these presentations, I'll just check with you or let me know if there's any requests for public comments on these presentations.
Will do.
And so now just at this point in time, ask if any of the board members have any questions of Graham. Director Palmer?
I just had a comment, and I just wanted Grant to know that, you know, the board is 100% behind you in terms of anything you might need from any of us. I'm sure we are all. You've got a lot of different capabilities here on this board, and so we're more than willing to step up when needed. So thank you so much for taking this on.
Thank you for the comment, Director Palmer.
Any other comments from members of the board or questions? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to 7B, which is the April monthly report.
Okay, let me wait to get that up here. Is it frozen up? Hang on one second. Almost there. Okay, all right. So the monthly report was obviously provided in the board packet, but there's a few items that I wanted to highlight, a couple of key items. First, Claudia, if you would jump to section 1. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the work being performed by the engineering team, been primarily focused on wrapping up the EPR and engineering drawings and map books for the Bethany Reservoir alternative. At the same time, the engineering team's been working really hard to refine the list of future scope activities to be addressed in the next fiscal year. The fieldwork team is continuing to negotiate temporary entry permits and for the remaining FY 2021 and then FY 21-22 explorations. But I wanted to note that we were able to complete several explorations at the Southern Forebay site, as well as along the rim of Bethany Reservoir. So that is great news. That is much needed data. Next, if you would skip to 2, stakeholder engagement. So as you all know, we did not have the stakeholder engagement committee meeting in March. Our next SEC meeting is coming up on April 28th. In the interim, we continued providing information to the community using a variety of approaches, including social media. The communications team has really been boosting posts to invite more people to engage with our social media page and website, which is reflected in some of the increased activity that I've noted here in the report. You can see that we're increasing, so you've got some updates there that are listed. It's increasing likes, a lot more reach, and a lot more folks engaging with and exploring the information that's available. I'll make a quick plug to check out the new virtual tours and map book that are on the DCA YouTube channel and Facebook page. It's pretty cool and engaging content. We're also planning to send a monthly newsletter to keep the community informed of what's going on. And as I said, the SEC is continuing to move forward. We've had a couple of folks step down with the delivery of the conceptual designs to DWR. But I expect as we move forward, the cadence is likely to change a bit, but we're eager to continue to see the SEC move forward in a way that respects everyone's time and continues to support community-focused design and engagement. Let's skip to the next section, Claudia, is item 3, the budget. Just wanted to make a quick note here on the status of our current budget. We have a budget of $27 million for FY 2021, and we're projecting an estimate at completion right now for the fiscal year of about $25.5 million, representing an underage of almost $1.5 million. So this is something we'll be watching closely over the coming months, but just wanted to highlight that for the board. I think everything's been working really well. A lot of efficient work going on, and no sacrifices in terms of quality. So that's all I wanted to highlight in the monthly board report. But obviously it's here, and there's questions.
Yes, thank you, Graham. Excellent report. Any public comments on this item on the agenda?
President Atwater, at this time, we have not received any public comment requests for this item.
Great. I'll ask if any of the directors have any additional questions or comments about the draft budget and the monthly report. All right. Well, we'll move on to 7C. And Graham, you're going to present this too?
I'll start, yeah, I will, President Atwater, I'll start it out. So, but before we get into the details of the budget here, I wanted to first provide some context of where we are. So in this slide, I'm showing the interface between DWR's environmental assessment, I'll call it an approximate schedule, those approximate milestones, relative to the DCA's main activities on the bottom. And so you can see we're delivering the Bethany Reservoir alternative concept designs. We're really near the tail end of that part. Continuing with our geotechnical program, which extends, you can see that extending forward, as well as addressing any requests for information changes in the conceptual designs from DWR coming out of the environmental process. But I'll also note as part of that line, we'll be also considering and validating feature design concepts that future design concepts that should be further considered during final design. The CEQA NEPA process has pushed out the water rights and Delta Plan consistency approvals to about FY 23-24. So obviously both of these approvals are critical to the initiation of further, more detailed design work. So based on this, we would assume potentially beginning some of the early engineering work on the preferred alternative during FY 23-24. That's a ballpark at this point. So next slide, please. So here I'm showing a summary of our anticipated FY 21-22 and then FY 22-23 budgets. And so this is looking forward. Again, just as a reminder, by comparison, we have a current budget for FY 2021 of $27 million, which was needed to really complete the heavy lift of conceptual engineering. This budget for next year, FY 21-22, reflects a leaner organization and a shift in focus. DWR and the environmental process is really going to be driving, much of driving the bus here, and we're going to be very responsive to that. This year, we delivered our key conceptual engineering deliverables so DWR could perform environmental assessments. We launched our geotechnical program and continued our stakeholder engagement, reflecting our continued commitment to transparent dialogue. Next year, we'll be maintaining our core staff to be responsive to the environmental team and make requested modifications to the documents as issues are identified. We'll also complete some of the engineering work that was deferred from the current fiscal year scope, and then also keep an eye on incoming geotechnical data to validate many of our design assumptions. And of course, we will continue our commitment to community engagement. Our estimated budget for the next year is $21.5 million. For FY 22-23, as Carrie completes her analysis and releases the draft document to the public for comment, we'll need to ramp up our services to support Carrie's team in preparing for the public hearings and responding to public comments. We'll also be wrapping up our baseline field investigation program, filling any remaining gaps, and as always, continuing to engage the public in some manner. Our estimated budget for FY 22-23 at this point is $33 million. Okay, next slide. So here I show a breakdown of next year's proposed budget. You can see it's broken into the project management office on the top and the project initiation, which is really engineering and field work, on the bottom. And we've got a total budget of just under $8 million for the PMO, the project management office, 13.5 for engineering. Just a quick rundown while we're on this slide, and then there is more detail behind, but my intention was to kind of speak to this slide, and then you can certainly refer to maybe additional details if there are questions. Within the executive director line item, that includes the executive director, chief of staff, chief engineer, DCA board meetings, general counsel, audit, treasury, and human resources. Community engagement, this includes coordination and outreach with the community, social media, and stakeholder engagement committee meetings. We've budgeted for 4 meetings for the next fiscal year. Program controls, this includes the controls lead, cost management, document management. Administration includes management, also management. Many of these have a management item to them, but the facilities, utilities, and IT infrastructure. Procurement, there really isn't much anticipated over the next fiscal year, but we have some potential, so we're keeping a relatively low item there for procurement. Property, we've got, this is referring to the right-of-way agents, field coordinators, and temporary entry permits. Permitting management, this is really the permitting liaison that's bridging the gap between the engineering and the permitting teams. And then we're holding budgets very similar to the current FY 2021 budgets for health and safety and quality management. Under program initiation, first we've got engineering. So this is management of the engineering contracts, providing support to DWR for the CEQA process, performing additional facility studies would all be included within the engineering task. And then field work, as you can imagine, geotechnical investigations and testing, as well as environmental surveying, assessments, and any other surveying needed at this site. So that's my rundown of the proposed fiscal year budget. So Claudia, behind this, there's a series of more detailed depictions, but that's what I intended to cover, and I think stop here and see if there's any questions.
Absolutely. I can check with Claudia if there's any public comments.
Yeah.
And I'll then.
Not received any for this particular item, President
Okay.
Allen.
Well, board members, do you have any questions for Graham?
President Atwater, Robert Chain, if I may.
Sure.
Just a quick question for Graham on the increase to next year. I believe you said that the next year's budget is something in the neighborhood like 33 million. And that was driven primarily by additional groundwater monitoring tests and so on. Is that correct? That
was a footnote, Director Chang, on that slide. You're right. There is some more, potentially more costly and time-consuming investigations that we would like to perform next fiscal year. But in addition to that, it's preparing for assisting in permit hearings, testimony, responding to public comment on the draft environmental document, would also be included in there. So you're right. It is part of the additional groundwater test monitoring wells. Those would be kind of lumped into the fieldwork studies bullet up in the table. But then there's a few additional items. Yeah.
I know it's probably a little premature, but do we anticipate one company doing that work or multiple companies, or what's your thought on that?
In terms of performing the groundwater pumping tests and monitoring?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that right now, Director Chen. It's something we're going to be working on and sorting out, but I think we are a little bit still far away from that, but can certainly follow back up with you as we start to hammer that out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions from members of the board? I don't see anybody's hands raised or anything. Why don't we then move on to, thank you, Graham, for that excellent update of the budget going forward. We'll move to staff reports, agenda item 8. And I'll ask 8A is the general counsel's report. Josh.
Thanks, President Atwater, and good afternoon, board. My written report is in the packet, and I actually wanted to highlight something that's not in the written report. So as you're likely aware, the governor has announced targeting a June reopening of California. And as part of that, we're starting to think through both return to office, but also potential what board meetings might look like going forward. And on that note, the legislature has a number of bills pending that would make some of the changes to the Brown Act, which allow these types of remote meetings more permanent going forward. So there are at least 3 bills pending, and they range from providing agencies flexibility to continue these types of meetings to requiring some sort of virtual attendance by the public for all meetings. They're all very early in the process at the committee level, but we'll continue to monitor them and let you know as more information is available. I'm happy to answer any questions on that or anything in my report. Thank you.
I have a question. How do I raise my hand?
I heard you, Gary. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, President. I appreciate that. I'm looking for, all these platforms are a little different.
They are.
Try to adjust as we go.
Yep.
Yeah, I would ask, the pending bills, are they, do you know whether they're permanent changes to the Brown Act requirements? Or are they limited duration changes going forward until we get further away from this pandemic?
It's a really good question, Director Martin. They're all permanent changes to the Brown Act, but they all take slightly different views on the issue. So 2 of the bills would make permanent changes to all meetings. One would allow agencies to do these types of teleconference meetings going forward. One bill, and then the other permanent bill would require there to be a virtual option. But there's also the 3rd bill, which would allow these types of virtual meetings in the event of a declared emergency. So that emergency wouldn't just, of course, be a COVID type situation. It would be any locally declared emergency where it was appropriate to have a virtual non-personal type meeting.
All right, thank you.
Great. Any public comments on these items?
Not at this time, President Atwater.
Great. We'll move on to 8B, which is the treasurer's report.
Good afternoon. Claudia, can you hear me clearly?
Oh, I sure can, Katana.
Oh, great. Good afternoon. Thank you. So this is our monthly report, and as provided, and we have attachments to this report for your review. And if you have any questions, please let me know. We ended the month of March. Actually, we began the month of March actually with about $3.9 million. We ended with almost about the same amount of money, which is not typical for us. As I told you previously, we only hold roughly $790,000 in the account. So what that means, usually it means that we have received payments from DCO, but we have not made our payments yet. So as of April 11th, we actually made a lot of payments out, and we were left with $670,790. And we also track the budget and actuals. Is a little different from what you will see from Graham because we are delayed. We only show actuals versus budget based on what we paid out. So that report is also attached. So anytime you see that report being slightly different, it's just because they're actually the source. And until it gets to our financials, this is what we see. But for tracking purposes and for accounting, we do track budget versus actuals for you too. So that's the report. I will answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Katana. Any questions from the board?
I have a real kind of basic one that you guys probably already know the answer to.
Okay.
I've noticed that in the draft budget and in the budget, the items are in a different order and split up differently than they are in the tracking listing. Is there a guide to in the the budget tracking as to what of the budget line items they tie back to?
Yes, for us, and maybe this is something I have a meeting with Graham next week to discuss. So what we do is when they present the budget, when you approve the initial budget, these are the categories that you've appropriated the dollars. Now, they might have more details. For example, program management, he might be presenting that a little more detailed than I am. So I just want to be able to track to make sure that what you're looking at really matches, because at the end of the day is what you approve is what I will have in the financials and track that at a high level. There are subdivisions in each one of these categories that they might be tracking it a little differently, but when it rolls up, it will roll up to these categories. Now, I say that because they're developing a new budget and we had issues at that time matching because the other source, the financials are the sub-ledger. So we want to make sure that we track everything based on how you approve it. Now, we don't track the subdivisions, but if they roll, if the budget rolls up, it should roll up to what you approved at the high level. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is definitely something we're meeting next week to discuss to make sure what we present, at least in the categories, matches what I have. The dollars might not match sometime because we're a little delayed.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions of Katana?
I just had a quick one. I'm thinking maybe this is what you were driving at in terms of like the order in which they're presented. I mean, it could be that you've got a lot of subdivisions in there with Graham's report. But it would be, and to be honest with you, I haven't gone through to check on this, but it'd be really good to have them so that they're in the same order so it's easier to check back and forth.
And I totally agree, because what I want to be able to do is when it's presented to you for approval, that's what we carry and put it in the system. And so we expect this expenditure to be spent based on those high level approval. It can fluctuate in the sub ledger they have, but at the end, when you say, well, approving this category, we want to see those dollars staying in that category. So I agree. We'll work together. We actually have a meeting incidentally just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Thanks, Katana.
Good. Any other questions? Well, why don't we move on to 8C and ask Carrie Buckman to give her environmental manager's report.
Thank you, President Atwater and members of the board. Just a quick update. My report is in the packet. A quick update is that we are still working on the environmental impact report under CEQA, and the Corps of Engineers is working on the environmental impact statement under NEPA. We've reached the point where there's a lot of technical work going in, but not a lot of results coming out yet. So it's a really time-intensive part to get work done. A couple other updates. We had the initial study in mitigated negative declaration for soil investigations in the Delta that we completed last year. And while those activities were on a break during the wet season, they have restarted. So we have a website where we've been posting updates every week to let people know where we're looking at next. It is a very approximate schedule because things change a lot based on landowner preference or weather or workload, but it does give people an idea about what sites are scheduled next. And that link is in my report. Additionally, we've been working on a report to document the results of our environmental justice survey that we completed last year. We're planning to give an update on those results during the SEC meeting on the 28th, and we should be having the report public soon, hopefully by the end of the month, but it might drift into May. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that we had our first workshop on the community benefits program last night. We have 2 more scheduled for May 6th and May 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. And we also have a tribal focused meeting on May 17th. And the purpose of these meetings is to gather information about what the communities may want to see in a potential community benefits program so that we can expand and adjust our understanding that we've received from the interviews so far. I think those are my updates if there are any questions.
Great. Any questions from the board? Any public comments?
President Atwater, we do have a public comment request from OSHA Meserve.
Right. Go ahead and let OSHA in.
Hi, are you able to hear me yet?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I can't tell what's going on your guys' side. OSHA Meserve, local agency of the North Delta. I just wanted to comment on the Community Benefits Fund meeting that Carrie mentioned. I did listen into that last night. I had some concerns about how it was set up. I didn't feel that it was very transparent in terms of how the people could interact with the staff that were running that meeting. And although it may be well-intentioned, a couple of things that I was very concerned about was that so we could see the staff that was presenting at the meeting, but we could not see who else was participating. So so it's completely blocked as to how, I'll start my video so I can talk to you, but it was completely blocked for us as to who else was there. And I think that if you're trying to have a community meeting, and because we have all these, restrictions, which are of course well placed because of COVID, I think, if you're saying you want to have a meeting with the community, I think you need to be, it can't be a one-way mirror. if the community is coming to a meeting, they should be able to see who you are, and then they can see who they are, and then they can get a sense of, what this meeting is. So I don't think that it's appropriate to take advantage of the virtual space by controlling the content that much. I think people should be able to see who else is there. In addition, I noticed that people were being encouraged, for instance, to to raise their hand and ask questions and stuff, which is fine. But if you wanted to submit a question in writing, again, you could only see your own question. You could not see anything else that anyone else was saying. So whereas your staff or whoever's running the meeting could see everything and had access to everything, people who are participating were basically speaking into a black box and could not see what anybody else was saying or asking. In addition, the time limits were like 2 minutes, which, there weren't all that many people on the call. So I would suggest that maybe at the beginning of, I know you have 2 more meetings, which is why I'm bothering to make this comment. If you can look and see kind of how many people are there and maybe gauge the amount of time that would be appropriate, given the amount of participation you have, just to let people maybe have a little more time. I thought that some people got cut off when, they might've had something more to say. And yeah, that's the main thing. I just think you guys should rethink a little bit the format about it. The other thing I think people were a little confused about is you were asking certain questions in the surveys to try to get feedback on the presentation, but the presentation, the part of the presentation that you were trying to get feedback on wasn't always being displayed. So I felt like sometimes people were answering the poll in a way that I don't think was correct. For just as an example, for instance, like levy funding as a means of, a community benefit, for instance, people said, if you read the poll, it was saying like, we don't care about that and we don't want that funded. I'm pretty sure that was backwards, and that most people were probably saying that they would like to see levy and flood control as being a community benefit, concept that would be considered. So I think you got to, make sure with the wording of these little polls that you do throughout there that it's clear enough that the feedback you're getting, people are actually understanding the questions that you're asking. And so the feedback would be more valuable. So, and not to, and I thought the staff, they did a very professional job with the meeting and whatnot. I would say Ms. Buckman mentioned nebulous impacts on the community many, many times. And I really took issue with saying nebulous. I think for the community, the impacts are very clear, it would really impact their ability to live their lives in this community if this project was built. So I don't think that's an appropriate term to use. I would think about a different way. I think in the handouts, it talks about, some mitigation being outside of CEQA. I continue to struggle with, since at this juncture, we don't know what will be within CEQA for thinking about what is this additional increment in the community benefits. So I think that continues to be an issue. Thank you.
Great, thank you for those comments. And I don't know, Carrie, if you have any quick response, or just be working with Reserve in the future.
I appreciate the time to give feedback. I will note just a couple things. One of them is that those meetings are DWR meetings. So, I'm here and so I can hear those comments. They're not DCA meetings, just to clarify. And the one other thing is I know that there are some limitations about the format, but a lot of that has to do with preventing Zoom bombing, which has become a more increasing problem. And so while we may not love some of those either, we're sort of constrained by trying to prevent some larger problems from occurring. So thank you for your feedback.
And President Atwater, I believe Director Martin has a comment.
Okay. Dr. Martin, please.
Yes, President. Well, I didn't get my hand up fast enough after Carrie's report, but I just wanted to ask Carrie, the public workshops that are at the end of your report, are the notices, or rather the announcements of those and the scheduling on your website? And they are all public workshops available to public attendees without limit. Is that the idea?
Yes, correct. They are on our website and available to anyone to register for. We'd love more participation.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And by the way, you already had one, I see, yesterday.
We did.
Any feedback in terms of the attendance or? Was it well attended in your view?
So I don't have the numbers with me, but I will say I really appreciated the feedback. I thought we got some really good and useful feedback during the meeting. And I know, people are giving up their evenings to come talk to us, and I really, really appreciated that.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Great. Well, let's move on then. We have as a D, a placeholder, verbal reports, if any. Do we have any other verbal reports for the board? Seeing none. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? I guess not. With that, and if there's nothing else to discuss, we are adjourned. Thank you for a very efficient meeting.
Excellent. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.